It's time for Global Insight. I'm Kim Do-yeon, filling in for Oh Soo-young. COVID-19 hit industries across the world, but airline companies were hit harder than others as countries locked down their borders. Governments across the world had to bail out airlines, and the companies themselves made efforts to stay afloat, in some cases even turning passenger planes into cargo planes. Now, South Korea was no different, with one of the largest and busiest airports in the world, Incheon International Airport, almost empty. No longer bustling with excited travelers. So what's the future for the industry? We actually have the CEO of Capital A, formerly known as AirAsia, Tony Fernandes, with us in the studio to discuss further. Welcome to the studio.
Good to be here.
Well, first, welcome to South Korea.
Thank you.
What are you in town for?
I came for the World Knowledge Forum and see you.
Oh, well, I'm glad I was on your schedule, but how long are you in town for?
Just for a couple of days. I leave for London straight after this interview.
It's tight schedule, but you still were able to make it here. Do you have any special relationship with South Korea?
Oh, plenty. I was in the music business before, so many of the music producers are close to me, especially Teddy Park, who I think is an exceptional world talent. And I think Korean producers actually, it's now their time to produce artists from around the world, not just K-pop artists. And then obviously through sport, Ji-sung Park is, my good friend, and I was lucky enough to make him the first Korean to be a captain in a Premier League side. So lots of relationships here. And SK Group is an investor in one of our companies, Big Pay. So we have a lot of good relationships here.
Well, I do believe that you have more personal ties to South Korea, isn't it? More personal, maybe your in-laws, maybe?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm married to a Korean.
Yeah. So what do you think about the South Korea's airport infrastructure as an airline executive?
Yeah, I mean, I think Incheon is a great airport. As a low-cost airline, we would love, low-cost facilities as well. Airports generally just serve premium airlines, and I think there's a huge opportunity to create low-cost airports as well. The outside of Incheon, I think some of the airports need to expand. I think Busan is slot constraint and would be great for expansion. But overall, airport infrastructure is great. My ongoing campaign with countries is to differentiate low-cost facilities and full service. Our needs are very different from, a full service first class. We're all about reducing cost, allowing more people to travel, having greater connectivity. So we really want to push airports into looking at two types of infrastructure. Not easy. We've managed it in some countries, but it's an ongoing process.
Right, and you have a huge presence in Southeast Asia, of course. Do you have any plans to expand, routes to South Korea, like maybe to certain airports outside of Incheon and Busan, like you've mentioned? Yeah,
prior to COVID coming, we were flying 81 times weekly into Korea, and we were the first airline from Southeast Asia to do Busan and Jeju. We would like to continue that journey and look at Daegu and other spots. Our philosophy has been about, and that's why cost is so important. Many airlines just go to the big airport, and that isolates many communities. What we want to do is 60% of our routes are routes that were never done before, and connect smaller cities to other cities. I think there are many destinations in Korea that could connect to the Philippines, for instance. And so, we were on that process when COVID hit, but we'll restart that process, and we're looking forward to provide greater connectivity for Koreans and for people in Southeast Asia to get to Korea.
Now, speaking of COVID-19, it must have been tough for your company.
Yeah, tough is a nice word. It was hell, actually.
Well, how did you cope with it?
Well, there are two ways of coping, as I say many times. You can put your head in the sand and just cry, or you can try and turn a negative into a positive. Very hard when you have 205 planes and you can't fly them, and suddenly all your revenue is gone. You have 21,000 staff, and everything's kind of at a standstill. So survival was number one. making sure we could survive and managing cash. We got great support from our lessors and creditors. We didn't get any government support, but governments in Southeast Asia had so many issues that was understandable. So we had to fend for ourselves. We turned to cargo and used cargo to kind of get some income in. And then finally, we restructured our businesses. So, we created our super app, which is like Yanolja or Expedia. Plus, we added ride-hailing to provide an on-ground mobility service. We created a cargo airline. We created something called Big Pay, which is similar to Kakao Bank. And we kind of just got enough revenue and support to stay alive. Yesterday was a historic day for us that actually, in the last 2 days, we've done 500,000 seats have sold. That's as good as before COVID. And so things are coming back strongly. We're not out of it completely, but things are returning in a positive way.
I wanted to ask you, like you mentioned, the demand is going to get bigger, and we see across the world news saying that airlines are not being able to keep up with the demand. But how are you coping with that? Like you said, you've
well,
seen
we're struggling, to
yeah.
be honest, in that for 3 years we didn't service our planes, and now we've got to service 200 planes. That's an enormous task. Plus, because we hadn't used the planes for a long time, the servicing is taking longer. So we now have 110 out of our 205 planes back in operation, and by the end of the year, 160. And then by first quarter, all of them will be back in operation. It is an enormous task, which many people don't understand. Trying to restart an airline of 200 planes, and it is not just us. You see issues all over the world. Is difficult, but I'll take that problem any day to not being able to fly.
Right.
So we're getting back, and as you've said rightly, demand is strong. I want to add though that I hope North Asia is still in a kind of COVID, and I've made many statements. Korea is one of the few countries that still requires PCR tests for coming in, and it's 80,000 won. That's a lot of money, and whether it really serves a purpose now that COVID is virtually over. And we still have China and Taiwan and Macau and Hong Kong still having quarantine. So we're still in people should realize that we're still in a COVID environment, but I really hope governments can move forward, because I think the tourism industries have been battered enough, and it's time to live with this virus.
Right, and I want to bring this topic up while I have you here, is that climate change has been a big topic across the world, and you see in UN General Assembly, that's one of the big topics as well. And it seems like there's a stigma the airline industry is contributing to climate change because of certain scientific facts that we are exposed to. How do you plan on tackling that?
Yeah. Just before I say that, not to defend the airline industry, but airline industry gives about 2% of carbon emissions. Cars, electricity are much larger. Even the beef industry is a huge emitter of greenhouse gases. It's easy for politicians to target airlines and make their constituents feel that they're doing something, but it's far greater. If you look at the energy, you may buy an electric car and feel great about it, but how is the electricity being generated? If it comes from coal power, that's the least environmentally friendly, while nuclear power is probably the most environmentally friendly. So I need to defend the airline industry there, but we will do our part. We're hoping to be carbon neutral. I think there are two things we can add. One is educating the public about climate change. Climate change is definitely here. We've all got to play a part. And we obviously are incredibly efficient at burning fuel. We fight very hard in terms of not wasting fuel in the air by arriving and departing at the quickest possible time. Obviously, a number of seats, weight of aircraft, and Airbus and GE have increased their technology in terms of fuel efficiency. On ourselves, we want to be carbon neutral by 2030. We have a plan. It's a very big part of our plan to be carbon neutral. with the use of biodegradable fuels, with the use of carbon credits to, for whatever we're emitting, we will replenish that emission through offsets. And I think very important is education. I think corporates can play a big part in educating the public because there's lots of things we do that we could do better.
Right, and it's still a lot of change their airline industries are taking. But what do you have in mind? Like you said, you started different businesses with the group. Is there anything that maybe members of the Capital A, app?
Yeah, I think we've built a kind of ecosystem. Airline data is very, very rich, and technology. And I learned a lot being here in Korea. When there's some great tech companies here. So we thought we could build a travel ecosystem. So our food delivery and our mobility is all targeted towards our airline customers. So if you want to ride to the airport, we're probably the cheapest taxi service, and right out of the airport, we're probably the cheapest taxi service as well. And then when you're in your destination, we'll provide you with meals. We have food delivery. We have a payment system and a card which charges the least amount of currency transaction charges. All of that was built out of the travel ecosystem. But once you go home, if you like our system, you'll continue to use our ride hailing. You'll continue to use our payment card, our equivalent of Kakao Pay and Kakao Bank. And so what we did is we took airline data, personalized it, and created an entire ecosystem for the traveler, which included freight and cargo. But then obviously you can use it when you're not traveling as well. So two things really drove that. Well, three things really. One is our brand is very large in our part of the world. So it was easy to suddenly say, we called our taxi service AirAsia Ride. We were able to leverage the brand, and instantaneously everyone knew us anyway. So we didn't have to spend loads. We have a strong database. And finally, amazing people. Throughout this interview, I not said it, but I have great staff sitting here now. It's the people that's kept us alive. That can never be written in the balance sheet. The difference between those who survive one of the biggest, probably in history for airline industry, is really down to the people. A lot of airlines got bailed out, got cash. Those that didn't, it was down to the resilience of the workforce. We call our staff all-stars. And I'm blessed with incredible people in this company.
Right, and while I have you here, we have a couple more minutes, and I wanted to ask one of my favorite questions. As an owner of QPR, right, as you mentioned that Ji-sung Park is coaching, how is he doing? Is he enjoying himself in London?
Yeah, I think he enjoys it very much. I mean, he's a great guy. He's one of a kind, right? We first met in Korea, actually in a restaurant owned by Asiana. And from there, we've developed our relationship much more than football. So he's an inspiration. It amazed me when I first came how popular he was. He was almost like a demigod. And even now, 10 years on, he's still a legend. There are obviously players in the Premier League who are doing incredibly well, but G is that special player. I think he enjoys London. I don't think he wants to be a manager or a coach, but I think he's learning all the ins and outs of football and enjoying himself. I think he's really enjoying it. It's been a tough life for him, because when you would recollect how he started from primary school, he's never had much freedom, so I think he's enjoying that a lot.
Well, I wanted to bring this question up before you go, because you're an inspiration as an entrepreneur, but as South Korea's football fans love you for having G on QPR.
Yeah, I think it was great that we made the first Korean captain of a Premier League side. Right. We've had a tough time in QPR going up and down, but I feel this season we've really got a chance to go back up. We've got a really good young team. Football is a passion. It's a crazy business, but when you do well, it's the most amazing feeling. Right. Let's hope we do well this year.
Yeah, and with the World Cup coming up, maybe AirAsia can also be a little busier time.
We hope.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And I hope the rest of the stay, I know you're leaving for London soon, but it's pleasant here in South Korea.
Thanks a lot.